me start. Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Cynthia Cromwell, and I'm the Voter Services Chair for the League of Women Voters of Collier County. We're the organizer of this forum. The League of Women Voters is a nonprofit organization that neither supports nor opposes any candidate or political party. Our mission is to encourage informed and active participation in government. Due to COVID-19 restrictions prohibiting in-person events, we have revised our program to be this Zoom format interview with the two candidates for House District 106. This event is being recorded and will be available to the public in the future on our website. We're delighted to welcome the two of you to this candidate forum for State Representative District 106 for the election on November 3rd, 2020. Thank you to our candidates for participating in this Zoom and for your willingness to represent the residents of Collier County in the Florida Legislature. And with that, I'm going to ask everybody to make sure the rest of us are muted, except for Charlotte and Sarah and Bob. And then stay on the gallery view, and we will introduce our moderator for the day, Charlotte McElroy, who is a Florida State League Director and past president of our local Collier League. And Charlotte, would you please begin?
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone, and special good afternoon to our candidates. Another year, another election. We meet again, don't we? I would personally like to thank you for your active participation to public service. Candidates have been informed that they will have 5 minutes for an opening statement of their biographical information and to inform us of their goals and reasons for running for the House District 106. And so now I will introduce them, and I will start alphabetically. Let's see, starting on your left, we have Ms. Sarah Mcfadden, and next to that is Representative Bob Rommel. Then the rounds of questions will begin with the same questions directed to each candidate, unless there is a question for a specific candidate. Candidates have up to 2 minutes to respond. They may request the moderator to allow 30 seconds to counter an opponent. Or if a candidate wants to rebut, he or she will have 30 seconds at the discretion of the moderator. The questions have been gathered from the members of the League of Women Voters and supporting organizations in the Collier County Forum Coalition. I would like to introduce Joyce Fletcher and Robin Larkin, our timekeepers. If you could raise your hands. We will monitor the time of your responses. Please watch for a green card signifying 15 seconds remaining and a red card indicating stop. So let's begin with the questions. Question number 1. And we will go with Ms. Mcfadden first.
Introductions.
Yes, we'll do that.
Opening statement.
Tell us who you are. Would you please begin, Ms. Mcfadden?
Yes, thank you, Charlotte. And thank you to the League of Women Voters and their affiliates for sponsoring today's debate and for your consistent efforts to inform citizens on the issues and encouraging them to be part of the process by listening, learning, and voting. And of course, thank you to my opponent for accepting the challenge and taking part in this very American activity. I'm Sarah Mcfadden, and I'm a candidate for Florida State Representative. I take the word representative seriously, being available and listening to you no matter what party or none, voting in Tallahassee not just in your stead, but on your behalf and in your best interest, and above all being ethical and responsible as well as open-minded. As a corporate administrator for an international insurance firm, I push the limits for women in the insurance industry. As the sole owner and manager, I built a company from the ground up, sharing the profits with our trading associates. As a volunteer for my political party, I gained experience at the local, regional, and state levels, was elected as the Collier County State Committee woman, and appointed as a vice chair for the state party. Giving back as a civic leader and community volunteer, I've learned about the everyday challenges facing Floridians. But my greatest accomplishment and favorite job has been that of a mother of our 2 daughters. I always get passionate about this. And grandmother to 4. The youngest was born on the 4th of July.
Oh.
My extended family is large, diverse, and hardworking, filled with nurses, veterans, and teachers, engineers, police officers, and business leaders, patriots all. As like to volunteer to bake a cake, to bring a cake to the school bake sale or church fair, as to volunteer as a PTA president or a Girl Scout leader, start a first aid squad or build a school, serve on council or as mayor, all true families, all true stories in my family. It never occurred to me to run for office. I was busy encouraging others, but it was inevitable. Apparently it's in my DNA. I'm running because I don't feel represented. Perhaps you don't either. 22 years of one-party rule has resulted in business financial interests and short-term profits being prioritized over people and long-term stability. I promise experienced leadership focused on practical solutions that conserve our resources, our time, and our taxes to create a Florida that works for all. Thank you.
Thank you. And Representative Rommel?
Thank you, Charlotte, and thank you, League of Women Voters, for having me on this forum. For all of us, this is a new way to conduct business, and sometimes it's much more efficient than driving around the state meeting constituents. And but I appreciate the time to be in front of your group and your organization and whoever decides to listen. My name is Bob Rommel, and I am currently the representative representing House District 106. Seeking my 3rd term in office, and before my political run, and currently still, I've been a perpetual entrepreneur. I'm originally from New Jersey, and I currently own 2 restaurants. Before that, I was in the mortgage business with offices throughout the nation. I ran automobile dealerships, some commercial real estate. And about 20 years ago, I decided to move to Florida to escape what I called bad policy and high taxes in the state of New Jersey. And, like Sarah, I never had the idea that I wanted to run for office. I was involved in helping other people get elected. And someone suggested to me that I run for office, and little did I know I'd get elected. But my life before elected was very fulfilling. But I say the last 4 years has been some of the most fulfilling time of my life. You get paid very little, you work very hard. Tallahassee is 443 miles away from my home, and seems that somebody always says they can do it better. But it's been definitely fulfilling, especially as we see these times of crisis, to actually see that your decisions you make influence, affect other people. And looking forward to continue on some of the things that I've done in the last 4 years and continue to make sure they, get completed, in my term. So, but thank you, and look forward to the questions.
Thank you. All right, let's begin with question number 1. As a representative in the state legislature, what is your plan for building a winning coalition for your priorities? And that's followed by, what actions will you make to reach across the aisle?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. That is a great question. Well, especially because reaching across the aisle might be a little difficult unless we have some breakthroughs, right? But I think my skills and past experience working with people, with nonprofits, with volunteers, certainly gives you the ability to empathize and understand other people. A large family certainly prepares you for that as well. But I think our first priority is going to be budget. We have got a shortfall already because of the pandemic, and we're not. We do have a reserve. We have a very healthy reserve, but it's being swallowed up. So I think we're going to have a lot of budget talks, and I'm used to that. The committees will have to start meeting soon, right after the election, I suspect, because we're not allowed to end the year with a deficit. It's the responsibility of the state legislature to decide what to do about deficits, and they have refused to meet at this point, but we can't end the year without doing that. So that will be the first priority. There's several ideas about what we're going to do about the budget, but we're already going to be compromised. My priority would be to make sure that healthcare and education don't suffer because of our priorities, and also that the tax burden gets shared equitably among not just people, but corporations. Corporations have had a limited role in contributing tax-wise to our state. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, Mr. Rommel, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I have the question. Thank you, Charlotte.
Sure.
You know, going into office, sometimes we all have ideas, but I can say that, you know, going into my third term, assuming that I get reelected, I don't have a personal agenda. You never know what emergencies are going to come up. And like Sarah said, you know, with this COVID and, you know, the shutdown of businesses across the state, there is going to be a budget shortfall. And, you know, budget is going to be very important because that is the only thing in the Constitution that we're required to do, is to pass a balanced budget by the end of the term. You know, so of course, you know, we are definitely going to have to work hard. You know, we were fortunate that we've been very fiscally conservative with our dollars over the years, that we had $3.5 billion in reserve to get us through this COVID epidemic. But going forward, we need people to get back to work, and we need people to travel back to the state. You know, fortunately, the economy in Florida hasn't been hit as hard as the rest of the nation. People around the nation are moving into Florida. Currently, over 1,000 people a day are moving into Florida. The building industry is booming because people are leaving high-tax, poorly run states because, you know, they want to be where they can be safe. They want to know where there's opportunity. Before the COVID, our unemployment was less than 3.5%. You know, so we will get back there once, you know, we get back to normal. But as opposed for reaching across the aisle, I'm very proud of the work that we did in the education and the healthcare side. Just last year, we passed a bill that allowed for, just like we're doing telecommuting and debating, for telemedicine. And during the COVID, you know, it was very dangerous for some people to travel to the doctor. So the telemedicine was a great way to work across the aisle, and we'll continue with that.
Thank you. And Bob, I was just reminded in the chat box, I don't know if you were here when I said that we'll be allowing 30 seconds for a rebuttal if you should need ever.
That'd be fine with me.
All right. And you'll be the first for the next question.
Great.
What role should the state legislature play in the coronavirus response?
I think we played a great role. Well, actually, right now, we played very little role. But, you know, most of it has been directed as emergency order from the governor. You know, so I think the governor's done a great job with testing, securing medicine, you know, that we're treating people that are currently being infected at a much faster rate, and the recovery is much greater. So in legal terms, the legislature has done, you know, we've done very little because most of it's happened outside of session, and all that's done from executive order or local ordinances. So when we get back, you know, we will look forward to coming up with plans for whatever that may be the next, you know, healthcare emergency for us. But under current right now, most of it's being directed by the governor.
Thank you. Ms. Mcfadden?
Yes, thank you. Millions to design an unemployment system that doesn't work. Millions more in so-called fixes. Florida is failing its citizens with the lowest weekly benefit and employer contribution and the shortest duration in the country. The governor did accept federal help for the unemployed, but Florida was one of the last states to accept, and the governor stopped the program after only 4 weeks. The governor didn't veto raises for new teachers, but he also made sure corporations got their tax refunds first. The pandemic and the issue of masking was politicized, despite overwhelming evidence supporting their use to stop the spread of the coronavirus. While vetoing $1 billion from other spending in a pandemic, the governor failed to cut anything from the roads to nowhere. That's $25.5 million in a planning budget for a project that's estimated to cost $10.3 billion to build. It will harm the springs and the ecosystem, and with insufficient benefit or return of investment. Threatened with school funding and health departments prevented from advising them, school boards were left conflicted between losing funding or spreading the virus. While telling everyone else to get back to work, my opponent in the state legislature voted not to return to session to deal with the deficit, ignoring their constitutional responsibility, but also avoiding a difficult debate that could underscore the state's uncertain economy as voters go to the polls. Thank you.
Okay.
Hey, Charlotte, I just wanted a quick rebut. First of all, Sarah, we don't have a deficit. We have plenty of reserves to handle so far, what has been brought before us from the pandemic. So there is no deficit in the state of Florida.
Thank you. So let's move on to the next question and talk a little bit about healthcare. And Ms. Mcfadden, you will be first on this question. What is your position on the expansion of healthcare access for low-income, uninsured, and underinsured Floridians under the expansion of Medicaid?
Well, asking about healthcare is always a timely question and of critical importance to all of us. I just read in Politico this morning that more Floridians purchase coverage through the Affordable Care Act than in any other state. I'm sure they're worried about pre-existing conditions and not being covered or healthcare disappearing altogether. We have 13.3 thousand COVID deaths in Florida. We just passed 200,000 deaths in the US, and global deaths are over 1 million. With the pandemic and the fact that if you survive, you could have complicated health issues afterwards, healthcare is more essential than ever for you and your family. We know that in the long run, good health is less expensive for you, for your employer, and for Florida. As your state representative, I will fight to improve your healthcare, not reduce it. I support access to substance abuse and mental health services for all. As recommended by an external audit, the Kid Care program should be compared with other states and improvements made accordingly. Reproductive health care is a human right for all women, and their privacy and constitutional rights must be respected, not threatened. Expanding Medicaid once and for all in Florida will cover 800,000 more Floridians, and the cost savings balance out due to federal taxes being returned to our state. Thank you.
Mr. Rommel.
Yes, thank you. And that's a great question. Obviously, healthcare is important to everybody, whether there's a pandemic or not. And what most legislators, whether they're state, local, or federally, they never talk about is the cost of healthcare. In 1964, Barry Goldwater was talking about the cost of healthcare when it was only 5% of our GDP. Today, it is over 20% of our GDP, and doctors, hospital, drug companies, and insurance companies are all crying poverty, yet all of us as citizens are the ones that are actually going broke from it. Whether you're paying for it yourself from your own checking account or comes provided from the government, whether it's a form of Medicare or Medicaid, or it comes from your business, it's still, the cost is out of control. Over the last 2 years in the state of Florida, we've done a great deal increasing access for people and giving them the choice to get what's the best health care for them. Just like we did with the telemedicine, where you can literally go on the phone just like this, and as opposed to driving for an hour, spending a couple of $100 for a doctor, go on the internet, talk to a doctor, and get some, if it's a normal situation where half the time you're not even seeing a doctor now, they can take care of you there at a much reduced cost. Plus, in the state of Florida, we're the ones that told the drug companies, we're going to allow our citizens to go buy their medicine from other countries where it's cheaper. And you know what happened the second we did that? The drugs that we provide for the people that are on Medicaid in Florida and those that are in our prisons got cut in half. So increasing competition is the best thing for healthcare. Also, we need to have transparency. We can shop for almost anything in the nation, except we can't really shop for healthcare. And again, those are the ones, it's the industry, it's the doctors, the insurance companies, the drug companies, and the hospitals, all crying poverty. But we all as citizens are the ones paying, and we need to increase competition.
Thank you. So let's move on now to talk about housing. And Mr. Rommel, what is your position on supporting affordable workforce housing at the legislative level? This is a critical issue in Collier County. What position would you champion?
That is a great question, and I'm so glad that you brought that up. Last year was the first year in my 4 years as a legislator. I mean, myself and Senator Pasadoma, we voted on every year to fully invest in the Sadowski Trust Fund, which is part of the plan for the state for affordable workforce, not just workforce housing, affordable housing in general. And every year the legislature, above my rank, has swept that money. But last year it was fully funded. Even with the COVID, it still got fully funded, and I'm going to continue to push for that. I wish they would make it permanent that if the money goes into the trust fund, where our taxpayers, when they buy a home and they're part of the doc stamp says going to the Sadowski Trust Fund, I wish we could make it permanent. I'm going to continue to work hard to make sure it's permanent.
Ms. Mcfadden?
Thank you. This is the first session since 2007 where the Sadowski Fund was fully funded by the Florida Legislature. However, it was vetoed by the governor, so those funds are not available to be used to increase affordable housing or to repair your home. But I certainly would agree that every session should fully fund that effort.
All right. All right. Let's find out what your thoughts are on voting and elections. And Ms. Mcfadden, we'll start with you first. What improvements in our current voting and elections system in Florida will you support?
Well, we must restore trust in the voting process. It's the basis of our republic. It should be easier, not harder. I support that we secure our ballot with federal funding and comprehensive security legislation at the federal level. We need to replace outdated or paperless voting machines with machines that provide paper backup for each vote, upgrade voter registration databases with cybersecurity protections, audited by federal security experts, improve voter access by expanding early voting and providing automatic and online voter registrations, promote voter participation by scheduling the primary earlier during the school year, conducting open primaries, providing same-day voter registration, supplying return postage for mail-in ballots, and eliminating ghost candidates. Election day should be a legal holiday, and polling places should be at traditional public schools, not churches and private clubhouses. Thank you.
Mr. Rommel.
That's a good question. And in Florida, luckily, our supervisor election does a great job. Our votes are very, very secure. What some people think that when you go to a polling location in Florida, that it's connected somewhere in the web. Actually, they're really not. Our supervisor election does a great job. We've had some obviously issues. We go all the way back to, Bush Gore. There's definitely been some issues, but they always seem to be on the East Coast. No disrespect to the League of Women Voters on the East Coast and one of those two counties. We are working on a better supervisor, but Florida does a great job. But, you know, as we look at these national elections and even some local elections, you know, we saw locally here our county commission race in a primary came down to 202 votes. Security is still very important. We need to make sure that the people are voting are who they say they are. And for those that say, well, it's only a small percentage of fraud that it happens to, but when you're talking about fraud and where elections matter, every single vote matters. And we need to encourage more people to matter. You know, in the upcoming presidential election, there's approximately 210 eligible million voters in America. 125 million people are going to vote, no matter how much we do. You see ads on TV, you see ads on the internet, but, you know, we can't force people to go. I wish more people would get active and be involved, but, you know, we're working on it. But in Florida, in general, our voting system is very secure.
Ms. Mcfadden, I believe you'd like to rebut.
Yes, please. In 2016, there were 2 counties, and they finally have been identified just recently. And on the East Coast, it was St. Lucie County. I actually have family members there. And in Washington County, which I believe is perhaps in the Panhandle, but certainly north of Tallahassee anyway. So I don't think we really, if that news is just coming out lately, then how can we be certain that we're not going to face more problems? It's best to have outside auditors. I would think that the federal government has those people. I mean, we monitor elections around the world. I think we need to monitor them here too. And
Thank
certainly the Voting Act, sorry, I'm over time.
Thank you. So now we'd like to hear your thoughts on education.
Sure.
And the question to you, Mr. Rommel, what changes to funding schools in the state of Florida do you support? Do you support funding charter schools using public school funds? Please explain.
You know, what's amazing in Florida, so I've been here for 20 years, and many years ago, people moved to Florida because of sunshine and, you know, retirement, golf, fishing, but very few people moved here because of education. Over the last 20 years, the education system has definitely changed in Florida. Florida ranks now number 4 in the nation in K through 12 education. We rank first in the nation in our state universities, and it's really because we expanded school choice. Children and parents should choose the school that's best for them, period. Just because you live on the wrong side of the tracks shouldn't influence the type of education you're going to get. We're very fortunate here in Collier County that all of our schools are very good. But Collier County is also a very, very wealthy county, where we have a lot of revenue. But 90 miles away from us, there's some bad schools. And if you live on the wrong side of the track, if we didn't have school choice, you would have a very limited chance of getting a quality education. And the best way to get out of poverty and the best way to improve yourself is to have a better education. And in Florida, again, we went from basically 47th in the nation to 4th in K through 12 education. And we're going to continue to push forward to make sure that every child and every parent has the choice that's best for them.
Thank you. Ms. Mcfadden?
Funding for our schools is a very important issue, especially going forward. Right now, public education capital outlay, the PICO funds, are almost exclusively used for charters. There's a law in 2019 that even if you have a local referendum to raise money for public schools, it has to be shared with charters. I haven't given up on better public schools for everyone, but charters for private and religious schools, while helping some children, drain funds to realize that goal. And public charter schools were initially intended to be innovative efforts to offer variations not fulfilled by traditional schools, and we should return to that concept. My opponent actually voted to reduce funding to our local schools, our traditional public schools, by changing the district cost differential formula. He also supports arming teachers and using public taxes for private religious schools, even when those schools discriminate. I do not. Thank you.
All right.
I just want a quick rebuttal there so that your members know that charter schools are public schools, period. They're open to every single citizen in the state of Florida. And to me, If you can give somebody a better chance at education that family thinks best for them, it shouldn't be the government telling your parent or your child where they have to go to school. It should be up to the parent.
Ms. Mcfadden, rebut.
Any school that receives public funding should have the same oversight, standards, requirements, supervision, and accountability, and must be permitted under our state constitution. That is not the case at the moment.
All right, let's move on to environment. And Ms. Mcfadden, you'll be first in this question. How can Florida best address climate change? What are your priorities for this issue?
I think protecting our coastal communities by preserving oil drilling offshore and protecting our water supply by preventing fracking onshore is important, but we also need to take back state control of regional growth to save our wetlands, waterline, waterways, and wildlife. Promote smart growth as more economical because it requires less infrastructure and is a better tax base than sprawling suburbs. As the Sunshine State, let's finally encourage and subsidize solar and accept that climate change is science and Florida is ground zero. We need to reduce the use of fossil fuels, work toward being carbon-free, promote wind power, cleaner transportation, and electric vehicles, and plan for resiliency, not just talk about it. Plan for sustainability and adaptation. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Ramo.
Great. Well, about our environment, over the last two sessions, the state of Florida has guaranteed funding for almost $1.5 billion in Everglades restoration and other water projects around the state. You know, water is, again, one of the important things that people come to Florida for, whether it's just going to the beach or fishing or just looking at our rivers and streams. And you know, as our population grows, there is a balance there that we have to make sure that we protect our waterways, but we also have to protect private property rights. In Florida, never mind nationally, you know, the president just signed, but also the governor and so almost all the legislature, we support no offshore drilling or fracking. You know, we don't need to see our coastline littered with oil rigs and infrastructure on shore necessary. And also in Florida, we are leading in wind, solar, and other alternative energies. If you happen to ride up to Tallahassee, as soon as you get off 75, there's acres and acres and acres and acres of solar panels there. But technology is not quite there yet. We all need air conditioners year round, so the technology is not there yet to have that. But as it comes on board, I'm sure consumers are going to make that choice. And even on electric cars or alternative fuel cars, it's about 10% of the cars on the road now are there, and they estimate in another 10 years will probably be another 15 or 20%. So people are getting there, consumers are making the choice, but as a state, we are definitely doing a great job protecting the environment.
Ms. Mcfadden.
Building the immense, and I mean immense, and costly Everglades reservoir in the Everglades agricultural area will take 8 to 10 years. It only serves to store water. Without a plan to clean the water, it will not meet the federal standards to be released into the Everglades.
I want to give a quick rebuttal there, and Sarah, that's a great pickup there, because as we're negotiating, talking about cleaning up the water, we're trying to make sure people north of the lake, give us clean water, because if they just give us polluted water, you're right, we're just going to have polluted water going from place to place. But there is some neat technology with natural grasses and stuff, cleaning some of the nutrients out there and more natural fertilizers and stuff. But it's, there's 6 million people that live north of the lake, and Florida is kind of downhill. It all runs downhill. So we are working on that. Good pickup.
Okay. Well, let's have another question on environment. Last year, Senate Bill 712, the Clean Waterways Act, was signed into law. Did it go far enough? Are there areas you would strengthen? How would you propose to protect our drinking water from pollution? And Mr. Ramo, please go first.
First of all, I don't know what you mean by did it go far enough? Explain.
Oh, I'm assuming that should there have been more things added to the bill?
Okay, I get it. No, I don't think there should be more things added to the bill. Florida's we are more than gradually improving water quality, whether it's drinking or our waterways. And one thing in Florida, we have a great drinking water. There are some areas of the state that kind of taste a little sulfury, but here in Collier County, we have very good tasting drinking water too. But I don't know of any outbreak of contaminated water that was not usable or potable for citizens. Going forward, as more people move in, we have to definitely become more creative, because besides having clean drinking water, we know it's rainy season now, but we also have a dry season. We have to keep coming up with technologies to store water for the dry season, so that we do have the water. So Florida's doing a good job.
Thank you. Even one more on environment.
Excuse me, did I get a chance to answer?
No,
the
you
next
didn't.
question?
Now it's your turn. I'm sorry.
That's okay. The Blue Algae Task Force was a great beginning. Everyone was very encouraged, but by the time it got through the state legislature and the bill that you're talking about, corporate special interests had watered down all the principles behind it. We spent millions in 2018 to clean up toxic blue-green algae, dead fish and wildlife from red tide, while losing billions in property values, fishing and boating, and tourism. We know that pollution is a steroid for red tide. It's cheaper and more effective to clean up pollution at its source. Animal waste from ranching, mining byproducts, chemicals and fertilizers from industry and agriculture. We must stop pollution at its source and hold polluters accountable for the costs. In the public sector, we need to address stormwater runoff, aging septic tanks, and failing sanitation systems.
Thank you. I was going to ask another one about environment, but looking at the time, I'm going to go on to juvenile justice. And Mr. Rommel, you will be first with this question. A recent report published by the University of Florida states that there are now more police officers in Florida schools than both school social workers, school psychologists, and school nurses. And yet there is no evidence of increased safety in schools. What alternative actions would you support?
That is a great question. And, being a legislator when the Parkland happened on 2 years ago, a little bit over 2 years ago, we have to do whatever we can to protect students, period. Okay. Part of my bill, and Sarah's right, I voted to allow the school to arm whoever they thought was necessary to protect students, because you cannot put a price on one life. We lost 17 lives that day, and since then we haven't lost any. So is there more social workers? Or I haven't seen that report or done that study, but all I know is that our schools are safe. They're some of the safest in the nation, and we're going to continue to do whatever makes them safer.
Actually, I'm making a note of mine, and I'll send you that report.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Ms. Mcfadden?
We need to improve the regulation of our public school police resource officers to be racially neutral. We need to equalize funding across our public school districts. I would suggest that we stop expelling or suspending children for minor offenses. It only rewards unwanted behavior. As a diversion technique and arrest alternative, we should increase civil citations, teen courts, and community service. We should decrease or stop altogether direct file and trying children in adult courts. In Florida, this decision is made by the prosecutor without involving a judge. Children are not fully mentally developed, react impulsively, and don't have the maturity, experience, or full knowledge of the results of their actions could have. They need their parents for advice and support. Direct file removes that option. And of course, adult courts mean adult sentences and adult prisons. Direct file is going out of style because it doesn't work. Only 16 states, including Florida, remain. In Florida, children as young as 8 have been prosecuted using direct file. I support ending direct file for humane reasons, but incidentally, it only saves money as well as potentially saving a life. In the 2020 session, we did have unanimously approved that panic alarms would be available in schools. But the session before that in 2019, any efforts to change direct file were shot down. And rather than going at the suggested level, age level for the children of say 14 or 15, debate took it as low as 7. And ultimately nothing got out of committee. I think that's unconscionable.
Thank you.
Charlie, I just want to have a quick response there. I know Sarah talked about not expelling kids at certain times, but all I know is, going back to the Parkland, Nicholas Cruz was suspended many times, and he was allowed back in school under one of President Obama's initiatives to keep kids in school, even though they was a bad and dangerous person. And I can just imagine that if it was today, he would have been expelled, and maybe that shooting would have never happened. So bad kids have to get out of school. And in today's society where it seems to be a total disregard for human life, we need to do whatever we can to protect people, period.
Ms. Mcfadden?
We need mental health funding in our schools. It's not correct. It's not a good system when there's more police in our schools than there are psychologists, nurses. It's just not right.
Thank you. And one more question before we go into a different type of questions. And this is about fiscal responsibility and managing the budget. And Ms. Mcfadden, you are to go first on this one. According to the recent reports in the Naples Daily News, the possible 2021 budget deficit is expected to be $2.7 billion. With a constitutional requirement to balance the budget, what are your priorities for funding or defunding various budget items?
It's actually 5.4 over 2 years with a $4 billion reserve, if I've got that right. I think we need to prioritize healthcare and education, and making sure that the tax burden is shared by corporations, not just on the shoulders of working families. There's things that we should be doing now. We should be helping those that are unemployed by increasing and extending their benefits. But going forward, as the pandemic wanes, low-cost loans and grants could be made available to restart businesses. There are things in place with Enterprise Florida, but the budget has got to concentrate on what's important and not waste our money on things like that road to nowhere. So the legislative priority as far as deficits go, it's already estimated at 5.4. It will be important that waste be eliminated, inefficiency be reduced, lawsuits against our citizens resolved, and unnecessary projects shelved. Conserving public taxes will be the legislative priority in the next session.
Mr. Rommel.
Thank you, Charlotte. And just so your listeners understand, in Florida, they don't know that. I know Sarah's mentioned it a couple times, that corporations would pay their fair share of income taxes, but in Florida, there is no income tax for a citizen. One of the great things about Florida, we don't have an income tax, and I think that's why so many people live here. And as opposed, you're right, everybody should pay their fair share of taxes at all times. But in businesses, unless people get back to work, they're not going to make any money either. This budget shortfall could get worse and worse. We need to get people back to work, period. And there are inefficiencies in government, but out of our $93 billion budget, almost 70% of it is spent on education and healthcare. So if there's going to be cuts, we're going to have to look at them, and hopefully we don't have to. But you're right, we have to have a balanced budget. There are a couple of things that we can do. There is going to be some federal dollars, and depending on how the federal government says that we can spend those dollars, that could bridge the gap to there. But we need to get people back to work. We need to get people back to normal. not everybody that moves here to Florida is going to go out to, restaurants and shopping centers and stuff, but we need people to get back to normal so we have the revenue. So people most people work for a living, and that's how they get to go spend their money. And as a government too, if people aren't out spending money, eventually things have to get cut. And I hope we don't have to get there, because there's not a lot of places we can cut. We're trying to make everything much more efficient that we can. But as people come, we have to make better roads. We have to make sure we have good schools. We have to make sure we have good health care. So the best thing that we can do is get people back to work.
Ms. Mcfadden?
While there isn't any personal income tax in Florida, our corporations have a 5% tax. That doesn't include LLCs and small businesses. Of that, 99% of those corporations, and we're talking really big time corporations here, 99% of them pay nothing. And that's because of tax cuts that the Florida Legislature authorized in 2017 and followed up on. In fact, the teachers only found out about their raise after corporations had their tax cuts insured. That was in the first week of March.
Okay. So before we go to your closing statements, I'm going to make it easy on you. I'm going to ask you a series of questions to which I'd like you to only respond yes or no. No other dialogue. Yes or no. So here we go. And I'll start with you, Mr. Rommel. Do you support continuing federal unemployment benefits to people struggling financially due to the pandemic? Yes or no?
Charlotte, yes and no questions when you're talking about something that's so important to individuals, they really don't work. I know you like to have them as gotcha questions, but they're not yes or no answers. So,
Okay, that's good enough. Sarah, do you have a yes or no on that?
I do. I think it's important to support our families, not just our businesses.
Yes or no? So
Yes.
it's yes. All right. Next question, we'll start with you, Ms. Mcfadden, on health. Do you support greater controls on the labeling of CBD products?
Yes.
Uh,
Mr. Rommel?
The verdict is still out. To me, many of them are like snake oil products. So it's like buying beauty medicine online, buyer beware. Yeah.
So that's a no.
I didn't say it was a no. I said buyer. We'll see. It's too soon.
It's a we'll see. Okay. Next one on housing, and this is to you, Mr. Rommel. Will you support maintaining the Sadowski Housing Fund, Trust Fund for its intended purpose?
There's a 100% yes answer.
Ms. Mcfadden?
Yes.
Okay, voting in elections, Ms. Mcfadden, do you support expanding the number of days for voting?
Yes.
or no? Okay, Mr. Rommel?
I don't see it necessary.
Okay, next question, governance, Mr. Rommel. What is your position on home rule for counties and municipalities? Oh, that's a hard one to do, yes or no?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, in some cases, no, in some cases.
Yeah. And Sarah, how about you?
Also very hard to do yes or no. I support home rule.
Thank you. Okay, the environment, Ms. Mcfadden, do you support full funding of the Florida Forever Land Acquisition Program?
Yes.
Yes.
Rommel, thank
Yeah.
you. Transportation, Mr. Rommel, do you support funding the toll roads in Florida's corridor?
I don't think that makes sense, because the toll roads are going to be funded through tolls.
Okay, so the answer is okay.
The question doesn't make sense, because how the road is going to be funded is when people pay a toll.
Okay. Ms. McFadden.
Just to clarify, you're talking about the MCOR?
Yeah.
I don't support that.
Okay. And last one, juvenile justice. Ms. McFadden, would you support a law establishing a minimum arrest age of 12 years old?
I'd like it to be higher. Now we're putting 6 and 7-year-olds in handcuffs.
Mr. Rommel,
No.
you would not support it?
No.
Okay. All right. So now it's time we would like to hear the final closing statements from our candidates. And for that, I'm going to have Ms. Mcfadden go first.
Thank you. And thanks again to the League and all involved in today's debate. 22 years of one-party rule has resulted in business financial interests and short-term profits being prioritized over people and long-term stability. I'm an experienced administrator who has also owned and operated a small business. I have a background in regional, state, and local politics. My whole life, I've been a dedicated community volunteer and civic leader. But as you've heard today, many of our problems can only be solved by the Florida State Legislature. I'm asking for your vote in the November election. I think I have the skills, experience, and determination to do some good in Tallahassee on your behalf. I promised experienced leadership focused on practical solutions that can serve our resources, our time, and our taxes to create a Florida that works for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rama?
Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you, League. Thank you, Sarah. Again, this is an interesting way to do this, but I've been a legislator here for 4 years now, seeking my third term, and hopefully, you'll vote for me, or some of your folks listening will vote for me. Florida truly is an amazing state. We have over 21 million, almost 22 million people that live here. 1,000 people a day are moving here, and they're moving from states like New York, New Jersey, and Illinois because of high taxes, poorly run local government and state government, poor quality of life. Here we have a great quality of life. We have a great environment to live in, whether you want to be leisure. And now we have an incredible education system. And over the last 22 years, as Sarah said, our education has greatly improved. We've improved access to healthcare for all, whether you're rich or poor. And we continue to lead the nation in trying to drive down the cost of healthcare. And through our leadership, also, our state is fiscally responsible. And as we approach this pandemic, you don't hear our governor saying that we're going to have to bond $10 or $20 billion to get through it. We have reserves. We're going to get through it. The most important thing is that we get people back to work in a safe manner and continue to give a reason for people to want to bring their business here and for citizens to want to continue to live here. And I'm proud of the work we've done, and hopefully we'll have that opportunity to continue as 1,000 people a day move here. And we want to make sure that they all have the opportunity that we all have had. And, I appreciate everybody's time, and, look forward to your vote November 3rd.
Thank you. And with that, I'll turn this over to Cynthia Cromwell.
Thank you. I thank both of you candidates. I think you did a superb job, both of you. Getting your points across is very impressive, especially in this new format, which we're all learning as we go. So I thank you for that. In closing, I'm going to address the public. We want to remind everyone that Election Day is November 3rd between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. The deadline for voter registration is October 5th. Early voting begins October 19th and runs through the 31st. The deadline to request a vote by mail ballot is October 24th. Many dates here. The League of Women Voters recommends that the public obtain a vote by mail ballot and vote early in the election. Drop boxes are available for those voters concerned about mail delivery. If you prefer to vote in person, vote at your assigned polling place on November 3rd. A video of this forum is going to be posted on our website, lwvcolliercounty.com. This Zoom recording will also be provided to our co-sponsoring organizations and available on our Facebook page. You can find many candidates' profiles, local and state and national election information on our national website, www.vote411.org. We want to thank our volunteers, Joyce Fletcher, Julie Wade, Robin Larkin, Patricia Aiken O'Neill, Suzanne Allegro, Mary Waller, and our moderator, Charlotte Nicomo. Thank you to the candidates for participating. Thank you to the public for watching, and remember to vote on November 3rd. Good evening. Good
Thank
job.
you. Well
Good
done.
job. So,
Thanks, Joyce.
yes, I really, really appreciate both of you coming today. So, and it was very enlightening. I think you probably took issue with some of our questions, but that's okay. It was